I absolutely love the fall, and we're kind of getting there. We're really close to the fall season. Even though I've been in fall mode for weeks, I'm already starting my fall crochet projects, and this hat is one of my favorites to do first because it's a really nice transitional hat. It's light and airy, easy and comfortable to wear, super quick to make, by the way, and actually really quite easy. I always have a really fun time picking yarn for this project because I get to use a yarn that I don't typically use a whole lot because it's a number 2 weight yarn. But it's perfect for this project because you can pair it with a larger crochet hook, a 6.5mm to be exact, and you get a nice and airy stitch and a hat that doesn't take years and years to make. So this year I'm using some of my stash yarn. This stuff came from Knit Crate, probably many years ago at this point. I have some of these beautiful hand-dyed yarns that came from my knit crates sitting around. I've been kind of working my way through them. They're no longer available, but just know that you can choose any number 2 weight yarn that you can find that's in your stash, that you like, that you think is really pretty, and it'll be perfect for this hat. So I already mentioned it once before, but we're using a 6.5mm crochet hook, which is way, way bigger than you would normally pair with this yarn, and that's how you get the open airiness to the hat. Now, I like to start off this project with a magic ring, but if you hate the magic ring, no worries. You can start off this circle, it's just a basic circle, using any method that you're comfortable with. I'll show you how to do the magic ring here. The main thing that you need for your first round is 12 double crochets. So I've got 2 chains here. I'm counting that as a double crochet. So I'll make 11 more in my magic ring here. So just make sure that you have 12 double crochets. And this is a little bit different. If you've read my circle guide, like just how to crochet circles and the magic formula for how you increase, we're following a lot of the same principles there, but the starting number here is completely different. So normally I would work 10 double crochets, I would work 10 double crochets in a circle for a really perfect double crochet circle. And that would be my starting number. So we've got 2 extra here. And the reason for that is so we have a little bit more of an airiness to this hat. It's a little bit, it's not a slouchy, I wouldn't say, but it does have a little bit of flexibility in the crown. So when you have your 12 double crochets, instead of joining, which you can absolutely do, I'm doing things a little bit different this time around than I have in previous years for this project. Normally, I like to join at the end of the round with double crochet stitches, but I was thinking, after working half of one in a completely different color, that I should try it in a spiral. I think we can get away with it. Honestly, for most hats, I like to crochet in a spiral whenever I can, because you don't have joins that show at the back at that point. Because everybody around you can see all areas of your hat, I like to eliminate the joins if I can. We're going to experiment a little bit to see if that is the case. So you'll need a stitch marker so that you can mark the first stitch of the next round. Now you're probably looking at a chain for your first double crochet of the round. I've got 2 chains. If you have 3, that's totally fine. My double crochets are just a little bit shorter, so I like to use 2. So I will make a double crochet in the top chain there, and I totally missed it. There we go. There it is. So fiddly. Okay, so I got the first double crochet of round 2. I'll mark that just so I know that this is the first stitch of the round, so I can keep track of my count as we increase for the crown. Now for round 2 of pretty much any circle, definitely for this pattern, you're going to increase every stitch. And so that just means you're putting 2 double crochets in every stitch. So I made another double crochet in that chain. I'll move over to the next one here, and we will make 2 double crochets in this stitch as well. And we'll do that all the way around. So we started with 12 double crochets, right? So at the end of this one, we should have double that, 24, because we're putting 2 stitches in every stitch. I like to deem this hat as one of those projects where you use that special skein of yarn, you know, the one that you have sitting around, you bought it because you love the color, but you only bought one of it, and you've been holding on to it because you don't know how to use it best. This is a great project for that specific yarn. You know the one that I'm talking about. Okay, so here at the end of the round, if you're new to crochet, it's always a good idea to count your stitches at the end to make sure you're on the right track. Remember, we have 24 at the end of this round. And as we move into the third round, we're increasing yet again, but this time we're doing so at different intervals. So remove your marker and make 1 double crochet in that stitch. So that is the first stitch of round 3. And this time, instead of increasing every stitch, we'll increase every other stitch. This is part of that magic formula for crocheting circles. By the way, I'll have that guide link below. If you're new to crochet and you're not familiar with crocheting circles, it's so much easier than you would probably think if you know this magic formula. So there we have our 1 double crochet in the first stitch. We'll increase in the next one. 2 double crochets in that next stitch. And then 1 in the next one. And you'll just alternate that all the way around. So 2 in the next, and then 1. And so the cool thing about increasing in this way, your stitch count will increase by the same number you started with. So remember, we started with 12 double crochet. We increased by 12 in round 2, so that gave us 24. And now in this round, we'll increase by 12 again, and that will give us 36 stitches at the end of this round. So that's your target. You'll look for 36 stitches at the end of this round. And that's how we know that our circle, or our crown here, will be increasing at this point, and it'll stay round and flat. So at the end of this round, your last stitch, the one before the stitch marker, should have 2 double crochets if you've done everything correctly. Because remember, our first stitch was just 1, followed by 2. And as you alternate those, that's how we get 2 at the end. You can double check your stitch count just to make sure you're on the right track. We'll move on now to round number 4, and then we'll take a measurement for gauge to make sure your hat will fit as expected. So remove that marker, make 1 double crochet in that stitch and replace it. So again, this is the first stitch of round 4. And this time we're increasing again. We want our crown to continue to get bigger, but we're doing so at a different interval this time around as well. So last time it was every other stitch. This time it's every 3rd stitch. So that means we need 2 double crochets. We've got 1 there. We'll put 1 in the next one, and then we'll increase. So that's the repeat for this round. You'll double crochet once, then double crochet twice. So 1, 1, 2. This yarn really is working up to be very pretty. That's one of the fun things for me about working with hand-dyed yarns. They all turn out so unique and so pretty. And it really depends, you know, on the stitch and the project, the pattern. So you just never know what you're going to get. I think this one is really very pretty. By the way, I forgot to mention earlier, the pattern for this hat is completely free on my website. I'll have it linked in the description below. It's a really good idea to have the pattern in front of you as you're working along with this video. It's a great supplement so you can see how the pattern's written and you can see what I'm doing, and that'll help you learn to read patterns or just be more confident reading patterns in the future. Now at the end of the round here, just like before, our last stitch should have 2 double crochets. So I have 2, 1, I have 1 more to work before the last stitch, and then 2. So remember, since we're increasing by 12 stitches every single round, at the end of round number 4 here, we should have 48 stitches. You can go ahead and check to make sure you're on the right track. But first, before we move on, we're going to check gauge to make sure that this is the right crochet hook for the hat as you finish working it, so you know that the hat will fit you at the end. In a nutshell, that's why gauge is so important. You really need to check it and make sure it matches the pattern whenever you're crocheting something that needs to fit a specific way. So garments especially, but hats as well. It might not be as important for something like a scarf, because if a scarf is a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than what the pattern says, it still works, right? But this hat, if it's too big or too small, it might not fit you, and you'll have a hat that's not going to fit you. And what good is that going to do you? So we'll measure our gauge here. And it looks like I am spot on with my own gauge. You never know, if I'm picking random yarns out of my stash, I still like to check my own gauge to make sure that I'm on the right track. So ideally, you want the diameter of your crown at this point, at 4 rounds, to be 4.5 inches wide. If you're spot on there with that, then you should feel confident moving on to the next several rounds to finish off your hat. I would go 1 hook size bigger if you're measuring anything smaller than 4.5. On the flip side, if you're measuring something that's bigger than 4.5, I would go down 1 hook size. Usually 1 hook size will do the trick, and you can feel pretty confident in that. It's definitely worth the extra effort. I know it's no fun to crochet something, you know, we've got 4 rounds invested here, and if it's not the right size and you keep going and it doesn't fit, trust me, that's even more disappointing than having to rip this out and start over. So with that important caveat out of the way, we have 2 more rounds to our crown. So we're going to increase 2 more rounds, and we'll do so very similarly to what we've done in the previous rounds. So remove your marker, make your first crochet, double crochet rather, and replace it. This time we are increasing, and we're doing so at a different interval. I know I sound like a broken record, but it will help you memorize and know what to do with this pattern. So before, remember, we put 2 double crochets between our increases. So on this one, we're going to make 3 double crochets between our increases. So we've got our first one, I'll make the next 2, and then I will increase. And if you're new to crocheting hats or crocheting circles, and this is still kind of new to you, you'll probably have started to notice a pattern. Every round that we're adding to this, we're making 1 more double crochet in between our increases. And that's part of the magic formula for crocheting circles. Again, check out that post. I have it linked below. It's a really good read. Very good information to know if you like crocheting hats especially. But you know, circles are the foundation for so many projects. Home decor stuff. Hats, bags, I mean, you can start a lot of projects with a circle. So understanding how they come together, how you need to crochet them so that they continue to get bigger, but also lay flat. That's what that post will teach you. If you're not a fan of counting, because who is? It's really easy to get interrupted, and that can be kind of frustrating. So there is a visual cue when you're looking at your circle to tell you when to increase. And so if you're looking at this round specifically, hopefully you can see this well enough. The yarn is a little bit dark here, but where this increase is, this is the increase from the previous round. And look what I have here. I have 1, 2, 3. So this stitch should be 2. It should be an increase. And it's happening on the last stitch of the previous, or the increase from the previous round, if that makes sense. So we'll put 2 here. And then without even counting, without really doing much thinking about it, I will know that this stitch right here will have the next increase, because it is the second stitch of the increase that's right here that I'm working in. And if I count, I can verify that. I have 1, 2, 3, and then increase. So once again, at the end of the round here, our last stitch should have 2 double crochets in it. If it doesn't work out to be that way, you'll just want to check the rest of the round to make sure that you increased in the proper place. It's really easy to, get on a roll and maybe forget an increase or shift it over or something like that. Super easy to fix, but you do want to make sure that's the case. You can double check your stitch count. We should have 60 stitches this round. And we'll move on to the last crown round. And yeah, I think you probably know how to crochet this one based on all of the other rounds so far. Make your first double crochet. This time we need 4 stitches between our increases. So that is our first of the 4. 2, 3, 4, and then we'll increase. So at the end of this round, you should have 72 stitches. You want to keep an eye out for that. We do need it to be accurate. If you're off a stitch here and there, it sometimes is easy to overlook that and just maybe try to forget that it happened. But we do need to have 72 stitches to work on the next part of the stitch pattern, because after this, we move to a really fun and interesting stitch. So if you have a bunch of number 2 weight yarn in your stash and you're not sure what to do with it, obviously this is a good project to use it, but pairing it with a bigger crochet hook, something like a 6.5, I think is really the perfect size for me at least. That's a great way to come up with a lot of seasonal or transitional weather projects, because you get a nice open, airy kind of stitch pattern and you get a nice flowy, comfortable drape. But it's not taking you forever to crochet. Like if you were using the proper hook size for this yarn, the hat would take a lot longer to make, right? You're making more stitches, more rounds, that sort of thing. But this is just one of my favorite tricks for using all of that really lightweight yarn that I have in my stash, but not taking a long time to use it. You know what I mean? So remember, last stitch should have an increase. You should have 72 stitches this round. And we're ready to move on to the hat body, or the sides of the hat. So before we get into the really cool stitch pattern I was telling you about, we have a couple more rounds, actually 3 rounds, to get to that point. So we're still going to work with double crochets here. I'll make my first one here, and it's a good idea to continue using your stitch marker even though we're not increasing anymore because we're done with the crown. We still need to know what the first stitch of the round is, so it's good to have that there, to have it in place. So for rounds 7 through 9, we're just making 1 double crochet in every stitch, and this will start working the sides of the hat. It'll start shaping it downward so it looks more like a hat and less like a big circle. And then we'll get into that really cool stitch pattern. So here we are at the end of round number 9. If it's starting to curl in on you, that's totally fine. Just go ahead and flip it out the other way, because the part that you're looking at as you crochet is technically the outside or the right side of the hat, but it does like to curl in if you're not careful. Now, we're officially done with double crochet stitches at this point, kind of. We've got sort of a double crochet cluster that's coming up next. So remove your marker. And this time we are going to chain 1. We're going to skip that first stitch and we'll work in the next one. So for this one, we'll yarn over, insert the hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's like half of a double crochet, right? We'll leave that there. We're going to make a double crochet cluster. So we want to do that 2 more times. Leave those. So we have 3 partial double crochets. Then we'll yarn over, pull through all 4 of these loops. And this now becomes our first stitch of the round. So I'm going to mark this one, and then we'll chain 1, we'll skip the next double crochet, and we'll work that same double crochet cluster in the next stitch. This is one of my favorite stitches. It's so simple, but so interesting to look at. There's a lot of really great height to it, so whenever you use this stitch pattern, your project grows really fast, which is always a good thing. But it's fun and easy too. It's sort of muscle memory, you know, because it's part of a double crochet. I don't know, one of those stitches that I absolutely love incorporating into projects. So that's the repeat for this round. We're starting round 10 here, and we just want to make a double crochet cluster every other stitch and have a chain in between them. So right now this hat is available just in the one size. This is an adult sized hat. But if you think that it would be useful or you would really like to have this in more sizes, specifically some smaller sizes, let me know in the comments. I can certainly dedicate some resources to, you know, converting this pattern into multiple smaller sizes if that's something that you need and that you want. So let me know. So at the end of the round here, your work should look something like this. Of course, it's going to be staggered in height because we're working in a spiral instead of joining, but it's actually pretty easy to continue going from here. So we'll remove the marker. And I've already made my chain 1 after that last cluster. Then I'm just going to jump over into the space, the chain 1 space between this cluster and this cluster, so the first and the second of the previous round, and work another cluster right there. So we're not really changing anything with our stitch pattern for the next few rounds. We just need to have a cluster between each cluster, if that makes sense. But I am going to continue to mark my first cluster of the round just so I know where I'm at in the pattern. We'll just jump right on over to this one, work another cluster. And you know what? If you forget a chain between them, because you know, that's really easy to do. It's really not that big of a deal. You can totally just ignore that. You don't have to rip back your work or anything like that because you're putting the clusters in between them. Whenever you do that and you've missed a chain, it spreads it out far enough that you really can't even tell that there is a little mistake there. So hopefully that'll save you a little bit of time if you're like me and every now and then you forget a chain between your stitches. Now I'm still working through a little bit of this repeat on the green hat, but really quick, I wanted to show you what this pattern looks like in a completely different yarn because it looks completely different. So this yarn is another one of my older Knit Crate stash yarns that I've had for a while. It has some really lovely sparkle to it. I just adore this yarn. I've always wanted to make a hat with it. So I thought this would be the perfect candidate. It's the perfect, you know, thickness of yarn, so it's worked really well. This is as far as I have gotten on this one. A little preview of the next section that is to come, but yeah, completely and totally different look from a solid yarn that has a little bit of sparkle in it to a yarn like this that is tonal in its nature. It's, you know, darker and lighter greens in that one, so yeah. Try to get these side by side here. Yeah, just two completely and totally different looks. So I wanted you to be able to see the difference between the two. The other thing I wanted to show you, I mentioned at the beginning for this round, this hat that I'm working on here, I wanted to experiment with working in a spiral instead of joins. Well, this one I crocheted with joins at the back. And so I wanted to show you what that looks like and why I wanted to switch over to the spirals on this one. I don't know how obvious this is to you, but this is the join in the double crochet sections. It's way less obvious down here because the join actually shifts over. But this one, it's pretty obvious to me, and I don't know, I'm always trying to tweak things and make them a little bit better and a little bit neater. And working in a spiral, I think that's done that for me this time around. So this is the beginning of the round on this new one, and we just don't see any of that. So I do think I'm pretty happy with this change. I think you'll more than certainly see this change reflected in the pattern as you're looking at it, but you know, just so you're seeing it in real time. This is kind of how my mind works, how I like to tinker with patterns. You know, this pattern has actually been on my website for quite some time now. I can't remember exactly when I first designed this, but the yarn that I used first was Peyton's Lace Sequin, I believe. And the yarn has since been discontinued, which is a really big shame. It was a gorgeous yarn, but it was just perfect for this hat. It was very similar to this sparkly yarn version that I have here, but instead of the sparkles, it had little sequins in it. And it was just such a fun pattern, such a good pattern. It really deserved an update and a refresh and a new yarn recommendation, since you're not able to get that one anymore. So I think, though, it really doesn't matter exactly which yarn you use. Obviously, it would be nice to say, get this yarn specifically, and you would be able to find it and have no trouble with it. But in a perfect world, well, in the real world, that's the perfect situation. That usually doesn't happen. So I just wanted to make this one a little bit more flexible for you and give you the option to use whatever yarn you want in your stash, or whatever you have that's available to you. And you know, it's a versatile enough pattern that you can easily use whatever yarn you want, whatever type of color you want. I haven't actually tried this with a striping yarn. I think that would be really interesting. But I think this pattern would just look pretty with pretty much any yarn you throw at it. Okay, so that does it for this double crochet clustered stitch pattern. We have one more stitch pattern to work the band in, and it's a really neat one too. So first of all, we'll remove that marker. I've just finished this cluster here. I didn't make a chain, but I did, you know, finish the cluster. And now I want to make a half double crochet in this cluster stitch. Now it looks like the really long section, that's generally where I work my stitches, but you know, if you're more comfortable to work them in the chain, I mean, you can get away with that. This is maybe the easier approach, because the next stitch we want to take is in the chain one space. We'll make another half double crochet. And now here I am forgetting to mark my first stitch of the round. Don't forget that. There we go. So we know where we are in the pattern. And the repeat for this round is really very simple. We just want to make a half double crochet in every cluster stitch and in every chain one space. All right, so now is where the fun part begins. I really love this stitch pattern for hats or anything that you need to have a really interesting looking band. I just think this stitch is great for that. So I have my last half double crochet here. My next half double is right there. And typically we would work our stitch in the V, right? The top part of the stitch. But for this one, we work in the back bar only. So half double crochets are a little bit different than all of the other stitches in that they have a bar that's on the back of them. So you're looking at the top, and if I were to rotate it a little bit, it kind of looks like the same thing, right? You've got another V, but this right here is the back bar that I'm talking about. So right there, that's where we work all of our stitches for, well, I mean, really from here on out on this band. So here, we'll work it on the first stitch here. The back bar is right there. When we do that, see how it pushes the top V outward? So it gives it like a sideways stockinette stitch look to it. I don't know, it's one of my favorite stitches of all time. And it's really easy to crochet. You get a really interesting look for not a lot of effort. All right, just look at that stitch. Isn't that such a cool stitch? It's one of my absolute favorites. It's something you have to do as you're working in rounds because that back bar is on the back side of the stitch. And if you're working in a flat piece and you're flipping it back and forth, you don't have the same kind of effect. But very, very cool as it is. You should definitely try to incorporate that into another project if you can. But now here on the end, we have this last row of half double crochets that looks different from the rest of the stitch pattern, which isn't a huge deal. You could technically leave it like this if you wanted to, but I like to take it one step further so that it's a little bit more cohesive. And there's really two ways you can do this. I'm going to remove this marker, and the way that I think is probably the neatest way is to make a slip stitch in the back bar. And I will go ahead and place my marker here just so I know where that round begins. And so that would be the repeat. Make a slip stitch in the back bar of every stitch. But slip stitches can be a little bit fiddly, and they can be kind of hard to work in the proper tension. It's really easy to make really tight slip stitches, and that could throw off the entire brim, or band rather, of your hat, and it might be a little bit too snug. So if you're worried that your slip stitches are a little too tight, then definitely use a single crochet. It's not really that much different. You can see a little bit of the stitch, you know, because it's a little bit taller than a slip stitch is, but it still totally works. So then when you get to the end of the round, we're technically done, but there's one quick little finishing technique I wanted to show you. We will trim the yarn, and then instead of pulling the tail through that loop like you might normally do, just pull straight up on it, and then thread this on a yarn needle. Find the stitch that is right next to the last one where you fastened off. Run it through the back, and then run it down through the middle right there. And then that creates like a faux stitch. You see, there's the fake one. Just a really clean and easy way to finish off your projects that are in the round whenever you don't want there to be like a little bump or anything like that. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. There we have it. Obviously, I still have a couple of ends to finish weaving in, but who has time for that? That's not the fun part. We got to admire our work here. So I hope you enjoyed this fun little project. Obviously, this does not do it justice by putting it up here like this. So I'll have some pictures up here so you can see what it looks like worn. It's just one of those projects that's super fun for, like I said, the transitional weather where it's cool in the morning and it's warm in the afternoon, but you just need a little something. And you know, it's a fun project to kick off the fall season. Now don't forget the pattern is available completely free on my website. I have that linked in the description below. Or if you want to support the channel, or you like to just have your patterns printed and in front of you or saved to your device, I have that option for you in my shop as well. B.Hooked.com is our shop for all of our PDF patterns. We have some digital pattern bundles that I've curated, some fun projects I think that you'll like to work on, but you can also make your own bundles with some pattern discounts for buying multiples. We have some t-shirts if you're into that sort of thing, and we also have some printable cards, bands, and tags that you can add to your gifts. You can provide the care instructions, personalized notes with the cards, and that sort of thing. Thank you so much for the support there. Thank you so much for watching. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.